Today, the world is beset by many difficulties that have been long coming. Their origins are years ago. The fruit of the actions of people is beginning to be ripened. That is not only the fruit of actions, but the fruit of attitudes, beliefs, and fundamental assumptions. Today, the world faces calamities that are at this point unavoidable. And a mandate has arisen for humanity as a whole: change or be destroyed. But the changes that are needed are collective changes. And they are not easily made. The attitudes of self-centeredness, exploitation, and arrogance have brought humanity and this planet to where it stands today. Ultimately, there is a spiritual problem. For people are not connected to their dharma, to their relationship to the Supreme. For in that relationship to the divine, there is knowledge of the interwoven and interconnectedness of all living beings. And in that knowledge is the realization that living beings are all important, and that life is not to be used, but to be nurtured, not to be exploited, but to be cared for. And shepherded. With deep spiritual connection to the wholeness of being, to the love of the infinite, comes a love for all beings, for all creation, and a desire that all beings should have the opportunity to live their lives, to find happiness, and to move towards their divine source. With humanity's disconnection from its spiritual roots and from the natural world around, via attitudes of exploitation and separation, distinction from other life. Human beings have begun to destroy life around them to the point of their own peril. The millions of living beings, both human and animal, who suffer due to this general attitude of distinction and exploitation, is a root cause of the problems that face humanity today. Today, there are many groups of people who feel that they have been suppressed, who want to find their voice, who want to be heard, who want to be listened to. There is a general sense among people that there is an urgency, that something is amiss. And now that it is amiss is obvious. But what it brings up for people is a need to have their voice heard. For minority groups, for women, for Black people, for native tribes who have been exploited, for people who are not looked upon with respect in different countries due to prejudice and group identities. There is a need for the voice to be heard because of the urgency of the current situation. And so the struggle for basic rights and equality arises. That struggle is an old struggle. It's been going on for millennium. There was a time in the world when it was common to have slaves all over the world. And people with a better sense of humanity struggled against that slavery. And those oppressed groups slowly began to find their way out of oppression, to find their voice, and then to rebel against the oppression. Those groups who are truly oppressed lose their will, lose their voice, because they are so oppressed, they cannot fight the oppression. They feel there is nothing they can do. Not unlike the situation of how people feel today about what is happening to the planet. People feel there is nothing they can do. This is the beginning feeling of slaves, of people who are denigrated and oppressed. They feel the oppression. But over time, those people who are not oppressed, but whose minds are clear and their thinking more connected to the source of being, to divine love and compassion, they support those people. They begin to allow those people to fight for the voice of those who cannot fight for themselves. And as those oppressed groups begin to gain some strength, the people begin to gain some personal strength, they begin to fight for themselves. And at first there's great resistance. But over time, that resistance fades. And those people who are oppressed find their voice. There are no slaves today, or at least very small amount. It is not an acceptable practice. Why? Because those people who had lost their freedom became strong enough to rebel, and those people of the oppressive groups, those voices that said this is not right to oppress others, they became a stronger voice. It is very difficult for people who are oppressed to free themselves from oppression. It first requires those who are not oppressed to be active on behalf of the oppressed groups. The same is true of animals as of groups of human beings who are oppressed. Animal farms, the exploitation of animals is extreme. And it requires humans who are aware of the exploitation to fight for it. If John Muir had not fought for the great trees in the forest, there would be no parks. It requires people to fight for nature, for other species who do not have a voice, and for human beings whose voices are not heard. And eventually those humans fight for themselves. They make their voices heard, but they need support to gain that strength. And at first there's always resistance. But over time, as there's continued movement, there is success. Today, the world is changing. The very attitudes, as I have said, that have caused the oppression of human beings, animals, even the forests and the trees, has caused a lack of harmony with the laws of nature, a lack of harmony with the creative forces of Prakriti. And this has caused imbalance upon the earth. In social systems, and now in the earth itself. When the earth is out of balance, not following its natural patterns, but following the patterns influenced by human error, human exploitation. An imbalance occurs, and that imbalance has led from a small disturbance to larger and larger. The question is, what can you do against plagues, against fires, floods, winds, storms, cold, ice? These are the forces of nature. Out of balance, they become extreme. What can you do about the imbalances in human society, where one group oppresses another, where animals are exploited, where forests are cut? All of this is one problem. And the plagues that come in human society, they are part of nature's cure. But nature's cures can be harsh. What can you as a human being do as an individual? The society is made of individuals. When you align with your spiritual goal, with the love of the divine, when you bring that love into your voice, into your intentions, into your way of being on the planet, when you establish yourself in alignment with the infinite and the care of all living beings, then you make the choices to support that which supports the care of living beings, and not that which harms living beings. You support the welfare of all. Can you stop the floods, the wildfires, the winds, and the freezing? No, not as an individual. But when you join hands with others, and they join hands, and they join hands, it changes. It will change. You be harbingers of that change. Support it in all that you do. It is those people of the groups of wealthy and influential who throughout history have spoken up against slavery, against exploitation, who have stood for Dharma, who have looked with compassion and love at the world and made their statement, that have ultimately made a difference. Slavery in England did not stop because the slaves rebelled. It stopped because people of influence began to see, began to open their eyes to what was happening, began to see it was wrong. But they were influenced by the people around them, and by their own inner standards. So people who are in the group of those most exploitive are the ones to initially make the change. The same is true for global warming, for the changes the planet is undergoing due to exploitation, for the changes to support human beings, to have compassion and love for humans, for animals, for plants, for all beings, and to stand firm in that. So this is the way. Are there questions? You may think, what can I do? I'm just one person. That's true. But one person who stands for Dharma, and another joins, and another joins, and another, and another, and another. And it is a mighty force. But the decision to stand up, that's yours alone. The decision to do what you can, whether it's to give money to those who will assist, whether it's to write articles, whether to help people join together, whether it is to recycle or help with recycling programs, to help with other things that help people with their ability to make a change. Whether it is driving an electric car, minimizing your use of fossil fuels, standing up and encouraging y'all to look out for the health and well-being of their brothers and sisters. Find the ways that you can support the changes that you believe in. Base your decisions on the all-compassionate love of the infinite Purusha, and you will be fine. But be brave, be brave. Stand for Dharma. Stand for love for all beings. Do not be afraid to stand up for truth. Always. Do not compromise on this. How many people went along with slavery? Their silence, whatever they felt within, was their support. Those brave ones who stood up against it, they made the difference. And the world changed. Slavery is not acceptable today in any country. There are subtle slaveries, but not as it was. There is more work to do indeed in the social realms, but now there is work to do in the survival of humanity as well, and the survival of all the small creatures that you share this earth with. All right. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
It may not be related to the topic you said, but it's a general question. Seeing as the virus environment, COVID environment, quite a few of our friends have passed away, and the thought occurred to my mind, what happens to the soul once the body is gone? Where does the soul go? It never dies. It is eternal, but where does it go?
It is not where. Where assumes a place and another place. Perhaps there is no other place. It goes, it is not bound by the physical world. That is the difference. It is unbound by material limitations, and therefore proceeds to exist without material substance. As if in a different realm. Next week, I will go into much more depth in this, all right? But these bodies are like cloths, like your clothes that you put on in the morning and take off in the evening. When you take them off and ready yourself for bed, you do not cease to exist. You still exist. And you put on the bedcloth. And then in the morning, you put on again the day cloth. The same is true with the physical world and the subtle world. It is not where, it is a matter of what cloth you wear, what realm, what loka your consciousness is immersed in. All right?